So if you do not love algorithm, I hope by end of this talk you build some passion for algorithm. Okay. So what are the different algorithm solving strategies that you know? Because there are well-defined techniques. Some techniques for solving divide and conquer.
Dynamic programming, branch and bound.
Fantastic. Give me a problem that can be solved by that divide and conquer strategy. Smart shot. What else?
Quick sort.
Quick shot. Anything else?
Mine research.
Yes, we can do randomized. We'll talk about the complexity. But anything else? Even simpler problems that you know? Towers of
Hanoi.
You know that? You know the story of the problem? So, what is the Towers of Hanoi problem? Let's just take the problem first. And we'll develop. And you know the algorithm. I'll talk about some subtlety of the solutions, right? What is the Towers of Hanoi problem? What is that? We have so I have 3 pegs, right? Let's take a simple version of it, then we'll go for n disks, right? I have 3 pegs, let's say A, B, and C. And let's assume in a simplified version I have 3 disks. And what are the constants? Let's say disks, all disks are over here. What is the constant? So every disk is a different size and unique, right? The largest one sits over here, the next largest, and the smallest, right? Let's take 3, then we'll generalize to n. What is the objective? Transfer all the disks from A to, let's say, some destination C using B. So B is your temporary storage. So this is your source destination, this is the temporary memory, right? And what are the constants? At any time, how many disks are allowed to move at any time?
One.
So 2 constants, only 1 disk can move at any time, and at no time, a larger disk will be on top of a
Smaller.
These are the 2, right? And you know how to solve it. How many moves do you need? The smallest number of moves.
2 to the n minus 2 to the n minus.
So for 3, 7. Everybody is clear about how 7? What do you do? How do you solve it? First, let's say this is 1, 2, 3, right? Let's just go through the exercise first that we generalize. 1, 2, 3. What do you do?
Take the 1.
Take 1, 2,
1 goes to
3.
C, and then
2 goes to B.
it goes over here. Then
1 comes
One
to
goes
2.
so this is 1 move. Second move,
1 goes to B.
1 goes to B.
right? And then
3 goes to
3
C.
goes
so what do we have now? Destination, and then this becomes your temporary storage, and you use recursively. So basically, what you did, I had 3 disks. So recursively, I transferred 2 disks in the temporary by following the rules, 1 at a time, not a larger one, a smaller one. Then you have the largest one available. Temporary destination was empty. You put 3 over there, right? And then once you have 3 over there, this is empty. So recursively, you are using this as a temporary, right? So if I had n disk over here, if I follow the same recursion, what should be the logic? That means
shift n minus 1 to B, then the
that
last
means
one should be shifted.
recursively transfer n minus 1 disk by following the constants over here. Largest one goes there, then you use this, right? What is the time complexity? The number of moves. So time complexity is same as the number of moves. So let's say Tn is the time complexity proportional to the number of moves. How many moves are there? I want to write the equation first. You are teaching to, let's say, 10th grade student. They do not know immediately how it is to do n minus 1, right? So I should be able to, it's a recursive algorithm, I should be able to write the recursive function. So Tn is same as the number of moves. Because each move, if it takes nanosecond, I know.
2 of the n minus 1.
2 of, because I want all of you to work with
N
me.
minus 1.
Then, that means you are transferring n minus 1 disk in the right way, recursively over here.
And then I am actually taking the
One move, for the largest one,
Plus one.
and then another n minus 1.
Back to the original.
So that's why it is 2, right? N minus 1 disk recursively goes over here. The largest one goes there one move, and then recursively.
Transfer.
And if you solve, can you solve that one? The recurrence, that's the recurrence relation. You can do that, right?
N minus one.
If you do that,
It's n square.
is it n squared? What is, if I solve this recurrence relation, what would be the solution? Do you feel comfortable with that? How do you do it? Recursively you apply. Anybody wants to come forward? So recursively if you do that, so next time what should it be? 2 not divided plus, sorry,
Plus 1
Plus-
plus 1.
you know, I'll make mistakes deliberately, right? Because my word is not Bible, and I want you to fix it, right? Recursively, and this becomes plus,
Minus 2 plus 2 plus 1.
next time,
Okay, straight.
after k step, what should it be?
2 to the power k
You see the pattern, right?
t n minus k
Minus k.
plus k minus 1
K minus 1,
plus dot 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 2 plus 1.
and then how long should I go? With any recursive algorithm, I need a terminating condition.
Yeah.
Till n is equal to
When k equals,
Start from K.
k.
so what should be that value of k when I can stop?
The series start from K, not from K minus 1.
This one starts from k.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
okay.
Navendu, you're not sleeping. So how long should I continue?
K is equal to n. K is equal to n
N
minus
minus 1, because when I have one disk, then there's only one move, right? So when k equals n minus 1, I can stop, right? If I do that, that's my stopping criteria. That means I have only one disk left. That's what happened, right? The largest one left, I can transfer. I don't need recursion anymore. Okay, if I do that, and this should be
1.
and this should be
k n minus 1.
K in
n minus 1,
Yeah.
right?
Plus
Correct? What is T1?
1.
Number of moves requires to move one disk is 1. So T1 is 1. What do you have here? Sorry? Sorry, this was, sorry.
9.
No, it is not okay.
Two.
Huh?
It should be.
What is the mistake I made?
It should be
Oh,
K1.
I wrote what Ramandu asked me to do. Was
Yeah.
it correct?
No, because for 2, it was 2 square and it starts from 2. So for K, it will be.
I wrote k minus 1, that was not correct.
2, 2 square, 2 cube like that. 2 to the power.
Right.
Correct?
Oh.
K minus 1 or k minus 2? K minus 1, right?
Minus 1. K minus 1.
And what do you have over here?
So the n minus
N minus 1.
K minus 2.
I want you to fix the indices correctly. So when k is 2, so let's write the next step. 2 cube tn minus 3, right? Plus
2 plus 2 plus 1.
2 square.
plus 2 plus 1.
If that was the case, right? So what was my stopping criteria?
K equal to n minus 1.
We would win.
K equals n minus 1. If I do that, what do I get?
2 to the power n minus 1.
And then this should be
2 to the power n minus 2.
n minus 2, because now k is n minus 1, right? See, unless we fix the expression correct. Now this is 1, right? So basically you have a GP series. What is that summation? It's exponential. Why? Because partition was very bad. At any time, you are actually eliminating only one out of the recursion, and you still have n minus 1. So let's take the analogous problem, then you will see the difference. You said mod short, right? What do you do in a mod short? So that was towers of Hanoi. I'm taking a small problem first, then I'll actually go a little bit. This will warm up. In a mod short, what do you do? I have n elements unsorted, and
This read the 2 marks.
assume n is power of 2. I assume the same thing. Good partition. Right? Then what do you do recursively?
We
Recursively
again
split
split it
again,
until there is one.
So
Into
first
two.
recursively you solve, you short it,
yeah,
you short it.
then merge them.
So basically this is n by 2,
Hmm.
this is n by 2. So if I write down the sorting time complexity is
2t and
2t n by 2.
2t n by 2, then
Plus 1.
is it 1?
n
Margin.
Order of n.
n minus 1.
So I have
Yeah.
n by 2 shorted here, n by 2 shorted here. How do you do the merging? That was the division. Merging is, you compare this with this, based on that either you show up or you don't, right? Depending on whether you show up or not, your pointer moves either here or there. So that means you have to still scan n by 2 on each side, right? So the margin would be, or the conquer would be order of
Order of
n.
n.
So let's say some constant time n, right?
C n.
And if you solve it, what do you get? Huh?
N log n minus.
That's the order of n log n, right? I'm not going through the process, but you can follow the same thing. You just see the equation looks almost similar. But here the partition, only thing is 1 you have n, but partition was very good. And that led to a polynomial time solution than exponential. Right? Somebody mentioned quick short. Quick short, you do divide and conquer. What is the time complexity of quick short?
n log n
Worst
is
case.
What's
n
the OS?
square.
N square because
That partition.
you pivot. You are choosing the right way.
Yeah.
That's why the randomization comes, because you randomize the pivot so that you have equal probability of choosing the pivot. You force it to be average case complexity n log n, but worst case is still 1 square, no different from bubble short, selection short, insertion short. Right? So order of n log n. Which other algorithm that you know has worst case complexity? This big O is a worst case. Which other algorithm do you know that has a worst case complexity of n log n? Hip short. Hip short. Right? The quick shot, most often it works well, but in the worst case still you could be knocked out. So you can just see that how the equation change, right? So let's take another problem. I'll just write next to each other. In the morning, Dr. Shurkole was talking about search, right? And then she has talked about unsorted search, which is linear search. But if you have a shorted element, binary search. What is the complexity of binary search? How? I have shorted sequence of n elements. What do you do in binary search?
Divide.
Again,
Check the middle element and
you short it, check with the middle until you are done. Otherwise, you
go to either.
you eliminate.
One half of
One
that
half.
One
You,
of
right? So if I write the time complexity,
t of n by 2 plus
because you are only looking one half.
Hmm.
Although, right? Because you are not looking both sides. Right?
Both sides, yeah.
What is that?
log n.
Order of log n.
You see that? Because this 2 was contributing to get this factor and also this divide, conquer, right? Here the conquer cost is constant and I don't have any coefficient over here, and you know the master theorem, right? Right? So you can see that how, that's what actually master theorem teaches you, right? Because how varying, so in general it could be Tn, A, some coefficient Tn by B, partition could be whatever, plus
Fn.
some Fn, you know it. But right, this algorithm, okay. Now let's choose something different. So you have a divide and conquer algorithm. Okay? So let's think about a little bit of the proof technique, and I'll come back to other algorithm and maybe touch up on the morning discussion we had on the quantum computing, just from a practical perspective, how you can blow out the complexity. Right? So when you have something to prove, what are the different techniques that you know? Proof by, so I have something to prove. Proof by contradiction, proof by induction, deduction or derivation, enumeration, right? Let's take a very simple problem. Because you can write simple algorithm, iterative algorithm, recursion algorithm, right? So am I doing? All natural numbers. What is that? Add addition of all natural numbers. What is that? How would you prove it? Induction. And what are the steps in an induction? Basis. Then
This is working. Then we have to do it for in +1 or in -1 step and show that. Both
is it +1 or -1? No. First you have basis. Then
Then n equal to k.
what is that called? Hypothesis. Induction hypothesis. Then
we have to show that.
induction step.
Yeah.
Then you show either +1, -1 or double depending on the problem. But for larger value, right? Do you have anybody in your family, nephew, niece or somebody who's in the 4th grade or 5th grade? Yes or no? Yes? Will that student understand induction? How would you prove?
No, actually I can do this easily.
Come, just 1 second. I'm saying that, but they know how to add. They may have learned a little bit of the equation concept or something. Or let's say, I don't have that. I say, okay. Let's say my nephew,
Yeah, easy.
I'll come. Just 1 second. Let's say, okay, add 100 numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Just 1 second. So, of course, you can keep them busy for the whole day. 1 + 2 + 3. Doesn't know how to use calculator, right? But will not understand. I can do recursively also, right? I'll come to that. But will not understand induction.
You understand multiplication? That's what I did.
But he knows how to do addition, multiplication, division.
That's all.
Okay, that's all?
That's all.
Okay. How would you do it? Write it?
Reverse.
So you just reverse the sequence, right?
Plus dot 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 1.
Then?
Add up
Add all them.
See the pattern and then?
All terms will add up
And
to 101.
100.
How many of them?
100.
100 times 100 multiplication, addition, multiplication. You did that twice.
200. So
By
divide it
two.
by 2. This is it.
We'll understand. And now that 100 could be n now. Who did this proof?
Gauss.
Gauss, Carl Gauss, mathematician, the Gaussian. He was in the 3rd grade. So teacher wanted to, because he is bored with 3rd grade math teacher, because he is a math prodigy. Well, always will be talking in the last row with his friend. So teacher wanted to keep him busy. So that, Carl, add 1 through 100. And he thought he'll be busy for the rest of the hour of the class, and he can teach. But to his surprise, in few minutes he gave the answer. And this is exactly what you did. So induction, I can do recursion too, right? How do I do that? What will be the recursion? Let's say Sn is the sum of n integers, natural numbers. How do I write the recursion?
1 plus is something minus 1.
I can do, because first n minus 1 numbers plus n. If you do 1, then it's not that easy. You have to fix the index. Right? If you solve this one recursively, will you get the number? So this is the same as Tn is Tn minus 1 plus n. So think about it, you have an algorithmic complexity. What is the complexity? Let's say you have an algorithm whose complexity is Tn is Tn minus 1 plus n. N square, right? So see that when you had 2 over here for tau sub Hanoi and 1 over there, that was exponential. You get rid of 2, although this is larger, but still only n times n plus 1 over 2, which is n square. See the algorithm complexity changes completely. Binary search you had Tn by 2 plus 1. Merge search you have 2 Tn by 2 plus n. Right? So you can do, but recursion, induction, a 3rd, 4th grader will not understand. Right? So, have you read a book? Who was Ramanujan's mentor? Hardy. G.H. Hardy. the number theorist, English number theorist, right? Have you read a book by him? An Apology of a Mathematician? This thin book. If you get a chance, read, I don't know, Dover publisher published it, but whether you get it or not. It's a very thin book, bedside reading book, An Apology of a Mathematician. So he talks about some proofs are so elegant and beautiful. You look at it, you say, wow. I can prove, but this is generalization, right? So 100 you make n, it will be n plus 1, like that. And so G.H. Hardy basically talks about simple problems where the solutions are so beautiful and elegant. So when you do research for all of us, and the elegance is the beauty, right? So this is proved by induction, but I did not have to do induction for this one, but for some others we have to. So let's choose a problem on proved by. One is induction, proved by contradiction. Tell me a problem, and I'll actually come back to induction. There's an interesting fallacy that I can actually show. Because proved by induction, these are numerical problems, right? Much easier. For n equals k, you show for a basis, then assume it is true for n equals k. Yes, a mathematician's apology. It's a very beautiful book, very thin book. He actually defines complexity of problem, mathematical problems on a logarithmic scale. And he gives an example. The Karl Gauss's proof is the most elegant. The next problem I'm going to talk about.
Why apology?
Oh, that's a very good question. If you read the preface, he says, the fact that I'm an English, I'm not a cricketer but a mathematician, because mathematics is the best that I can do. So he basically, he's putting an apology, and he makes some concrete statement, and I'll be paraphrasing. Let's say everybody has some talent and skill, and if you don't execute your best talent and do something else, paraphrasing him is a social crime. If you're good at something, when we were students, my friends who wanted to be a poet became an engineer, who wanted to be a musician became a doctor, but that's not their passion or the skill. Maybe it is not true anymore now, but the point is, so what he's saying that if you have a skill in one or more, just execute that passion, then you'll excel. So he talks about a few things over there, and of course, all the scientists, mathematicians, if you, at the old days, then you reflect, right? Even Newton, who's still eating pebbles on the seashore of knowledge. Even doing so much, gravitational laws, laws of motion, optics, calculus, just think about all the fundamental areas, right? Still so humble. So this apology is actually in that connotation. Okay? So let's do something of proof by contradiction. What is the prime number?
There's no factor.
That's right. Even I think middle school students also know the definition of prime number nowadays, right? How many prime numbers are there?
Infinite.
Infinite? Can you prove it? Sometime, right? Is anybody sleeping? Please come forward.
We multiply
Whoever is saying this.
They have to come to the board, right? So claim, there exist, I could write, but I'm lazy. There exist. What is that? How many? Infinite number of primes, right? How would you prove it?
if we multiply all prime numbers till now we have obtained and then add plus 1 to it, then that number will also be a prime number.
Do you hear what he says? Whose proof is this?
Euler.
Not Euler, but starts with E and U.
Euclid.
Euclid. There are 13 different proofs of this theorem. Some proofs are 3 pages long with lots of mathematical notations and jargons. Euclid's proof is 3 to 4 lines. Most elegant proof by contradiction for this particular claim or theorem. You want to come to the board? Go. Come. So basically he is proving by contradiction. So when you prove by contradiction, you make an assumption, right? So you made an assumption that there exist finite number of primes, right? So write down the prime numbers, P1, P2. So he is saying that, let's assume it is finite, and then prove by contradiction. No, it is not, right? You don't have to write everything, just speak. So he's finite. I can enumerate P1, P2 up to let's say Pn, yes, or Pr, right? Can you see it?
Yes.
Otherwise, come forward, please. Let's see. Then he's constructing another number by multiplying those known prime numbers and adding 1. And that number is, let's say, big N. You can just add. You don't have to write everything. Just let's say you write capital N on this side. And then, no, not this N because you already used the capital N. Right? Because you already used the N plus 1. Then stop here, just a second. So he is now constructing a larger number. This number is larger than any of the prime numbers which are known. You multiply all the prime numbers and then add 1. What is N? Is N prime or composite? So the question is, N is larger than the known prime, largest prime known, but is N composite or prime? Composite? How many of you believe N is composite?
Composite.
Is N composite? What do you think? Does everybody believe that N is composite? Why? Why not? But how do you prove that N is not composite?
So N is not divisible by any one of P1, P2 to Pn.
Think about your first year class. So how do you have to program, right? I give any integer and you write a program whether it is prime or not. How do you do it? Sieve of, what is that?
Go
Sieve
after
of-
routing and prove.
Huh? Sieve of-
That's the series.
What does it say?
It says that if when you eliminate something, you don't have to check it again.
That means what? Any composite number.
Yeah. If, for example, if you try to one.
Let's say if I want to say N is composite or prime.
Try to find a factor of N within the.
Right. Within it? Within?
Root n.
Root n, because you don't have to go beyond that.
Right.
But do you see all numbers from 1 through root n or only the
Prime number.
only the prime numbers, because
Right.
that's the prime factorization theorem.
Exactly.
Any composite number can be written as
Product
product of
Prime number.
product of powers of primes.
Powers.
Like 12, 2 squared times 3. So, but power could be 1. So now that he has enumerated a number which is product of all primes plus 1. Now if n is divisible by any of these primes, then any of these primes are product of the primes, it will be composite. Is it?
No,
But because the remainder will be.
1.
So he found another number n larger than Pn, which is.
Right.
So that's this is n. I'm not done yet. Only what he proved that I have a larger number. But does it still prove it is infinite?
This
Now-
goes in a recurrence.
You just go by induction. You multiply all of these guys, add 1, get n prime. That should be prime again. So by induction.
This is the induction.
No, by contradiction first. Because he assumed it's finite. But by contradiction, he found a number which is larger than the known prime.
Still prime.
But I still don't know is it infinite or finite. So I have to induct on that to make it infinite. Thank you. See, this is the most elegant proof out of 13 different proofs that exist. That's clear. Good. Right? Okay. So now let's talk a little bit on, and you can stop me whenever you think the time is up, because you don't want to sacrifice anybody else's time, right?
It's a privilege to attend your class, so I think it's really difficult to stop.
I told you the professors never know when to stop. They know when to start. Okay. I'll give you a very concrete example where people working in complexity, quantum and all that. And take visual recognition by human retina. I'll give you a very concrete problem. You'll see the complexity will blow out. Think about a person who has no visual impairment. So on the average, how many retina cells are there? How many retina cells on the average if somebody has no visual impairment? Any idea? Anybody with a little biology? Because our biology is rusted after high school, right? Because you're all engineers and computer scientists or whatever. Anybody? Just any guess?
Millions.
Millions, even more than millions. It's typically 10 to 100 billions.
Oh.
So 10 to 100 billion means 10 to the power? 10 to, that's in that range, right? Let's say 10 to the power 10, 1 billion, 10 billion retina cells. Assume a person can only recognize black and white, no other color. How many patterns can he see? How many black and white patterns can I see? So, that many patterns, right? And if I put colors, 7 colors or whatever, how do I know this is Professor Das, this is Professor B and C, Professor? How do I know that is rose, that is lily, that is marigold, that is oak tree, that is maple tree, that is banyan tree, peckle tree? How do I know? Because I'm searching a huge search space.
Fortunately, I do not know
Because
everything.
some features actually which can distinguish.
So you see, this is, so that means the number of black and white patterns or even colored pattern, I have to put whatever number of colors I can recognize. The search space is huge. So we never search that huge large space to identify patterns because brain works in a associative memory manner. In the you basically store each. There are lots of hypotheses like in the neuroscience and all. Many times the patterns and images just stored in one bit. Very sophisticated because of course neurons work in a distributed manner. You talk about deep learning and all, but all the deep learning are with us, right? All the neurons are. You see that? So this is a huge problem. The complexity is not put to the end. It's a huge, huge number. But we still recognize. A few years later, if I see Professor Chucky have a latency, database latency, right? So I don't remember. You give a context. Oh, remember we were doing this thing, that thing. I was in your whatever. And then with the context, you suddenly remember. Sometimes I may not even. So that's the latency part. That way. But so this is an example. We have a lot of people who work in circuits in VLSI. Think about a logic circuit LSI of 1960s. Have a transistor with 300 input. Gets only. Not this nanotechnology and 1 micron has millions and billions of transistors. Just a simple, Professor Dash is staring at you now. So you have a simple LSI transistor of the 60s with let's say 300 input, right? 300, basically I have 300 transistors, each have 2 input or something, whatever. This is 300, right? It does some function, let's say just a single valued output. So it has a Boolean function that it executes, right? If you want to check whether your circuit would work or not, how many possible input sequences do you have to check?
300.
300. I'm talking about not millions and billions in 1 micron, even just right? So if you want to how large is this one? Because I dream in binary, but I think in decimal. So 10 to the power what?
It will be 100 digit
Close,
number.
close. Because it's 1/3 ratio, right? Because 2 to the 10 is 1024.
Log to
10 to the 3,
It's thousand.
yeah. Close. So it's approximately, let's say,
100 digits.
right?
10 to the power 100.
How do you test if circuit is correct or not? We have people who work in testing.
Fault model.
So do you really test?
Fault model.
And now you think you have millions and billions of transistors, that many input, not even single output, multicolor output. Intel, AMD, they're building their chipsets and all. So Gupta works in testing. He said, no, we don't test everything. What is the yield rate? Yield rate means how many chips are detected as correct and how many you throw out.
More
No?
than 80%, 75, 80%.
You throw out.
No. We accept.
No.
No.
But if you see in the 80s, it was like
Much less.
10%, 15%, right?
15%.
Yield rates. But you could be still unlucky. You bought an Intel Inside laptop, and after a couple of years it doesn't work. You go to the dealer, they don't find the problem. They say, okay, I'll replace your chip. I'll give you a different laptop. You are happy. Oh, I used for 2 years. I got a new one. But that did not solve the problem. Problem is that they are not checking all possible configurations. They have test models, test input, very sophisticated combinatorial algorithms, optimization algorithm, but still it's a probabilistic. Some of them are not. You say it is correct, it's not correct. You find out later, right? That's another. So basically, there are tons of problems in real life that you encounter. These are all real life problems, but complexity is much huge that you can handle. That's why the approximation algorithm, Professor Shaban Bhattacharya was talking approximation now, right? So maybe after this thing I'll stop and ask questions or anything. So let's think about this one. I think Professor Sushmita Shurkule was talking about this. He took about 1 kilogram of mass, and so let's come to that. There's a 1964, W.H. Bremerman made a conjecture. He was not a computer scientist. In 1964, first compiler was written in 1960-61, Fortran compiler by IBM. That early. He was not a computer scientist. He was a more like computational biologist in some sense in those days. He used to work with self-organizing systems. So Bremerman's conjecture is, I'll write it. I mentioned that in the morning, but we'll prove it. So Bremerman, W.H. Bremerman. So at that time it was Bremerman's conjecture because nobody had the proof in 1964. And that actually leads to some of this first version of this quantum computing. Then of course Feynman had the famous paper in 82, Thermodynamics of Computation, Ultimate Limit of Computation from very physical principles. Because no matter what you do at the very physical level, you have nothing but circuits which works on zeros and ones. Digital communication zeros and ones, computation zeros and ones. At the lowest level of the circuit, you are dealing with only binaries, nothing else. Unless you go for tri-step logic or something. So no, so he used the word in those days, data processing unit. Because the computational terms were all not very well defined. Can you see it from the back or no? Or you can listen. No data processing unit. And he also puts a clause because he was more like a biologist working self-organizing system, like living creatures. Millions of years of evolution, it becomes self-organized. Right? Data processing unit, whether natural, by natural he meant human brain, nervous system, or the living creatures computation unit, or artificial, but his artificial meant basically man-made processing unit like computers, right? Can process, and Dr. Chucky had a corollary of that at lunchtime. Can process more information than, and it's amazing how he came up with that, nobody knows, then 2 times 10 to the power 4, T is 7 bits per second per gram of its mass. And then its 70 is actually, it has been proved by physical principles, and we can actually prove it very quickly.
It's done theoretically.
No, it was a conjecture.
It's a theoretical one.
Yes, but he did not prove, that's why it is conjecture. But Bremerman, W.H. Bremerman was not a computer scientist. He worked something on cybernetics and more on a more evolution of living creatures and their computational power or whatever you may say. Like, so self-organizing system. There's a conference, 1964, on self-organizing systems. Maybe it was there for a few years. So basically, there he presented a paper, and that was listed as a conjecture.
Was there any work which identifies or has a proof that it's a function of time and weight?
We'll come to that, I'll prove it immediately. Right? But you just need the background of physics. You need uncertainty principle, you need quantum principle, you need special theory of relativity equals mc squared. It's for physical principle, it's atomic limit, right? Can process, cannot process. See? More information then. So this is an ultimate limit. But
that not should not be there.
I think no.
Oh, no,
Can
yes.
process more.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad that nobody's sleeping. Right? No was there, right? Exactly. I cannot take it twice. Now your very rudimentary 1960s transistor logic, What was the 300 input get 1 output? How many? What was the complexity? If I did 2 to the power 300, which is much more than that. Human retina recognizing all possible patterns, even black and white color. So this looks very large, but not large enough in day-to-day life. That's why the approximation comes, right? You never do, you always have heuristics or some other ways, right? So how do you prove it? So gram comes because, if you remember Dr. Shulkula was mentioning, you take 1 kilogram of your mass of your computer, then you convert everything into energy, right? So think about this way. At the very lowest level, everything is bits. Computation, communication, everything bits, right? Assume your communication channel, your computation is fault-free. So no loss of bits. Okay? So if that happens, so let's say you are representing information in bits. That's what you do in computers. Right? So if I want to represent an integer n, how many bits do I need? To represent any, because
log to the base 2.
so if I do, let's say, n bits of computation per unit time, and then I'll bring the mass in the picture, then that gives the speed. This is speed, right? BPS, Mbps, gigabit per second, that's the thing, right? So let's say I'm computing n bits, but at the end, these are all represented in binaries, right? So assume that you have, that means so many states, right? Either the state is occupied or not occupied. Is occupied 1, otherwise 0. So you have 2 to the power n all possibilities are there, right? So this basically in log n bits means n is there, right? In quantum electronics, this Planck's quantum principle, right? Or quantum theory. So these are all discrete energy level. So each of them represents an energy level, right? And let's say you have the total amount of energy E, because your computer has to be connected to electrical power source to run it, right? So you have an energy expenditure to crank the bits of computation or communication. Let's say your total amount of energy is E. And the separation between these levels, delta E, right? So how many levels can you have? Log n or n, whatever you see, is it notation, right? So basically number of levels that you can have, the same as the number of bits, right? This. Right? So number of bits that I can crank in unit time, let's say that is delta t. This is my smallest unit, is, right? Now I'm measuring energy, delta E, in time, delta t. What does Heisenberg uncertainty principle say? Because positional momentum is same as energy and time, what should it be?
Greater than equal to
Delta
H by 2.
is
H by 2 by H.
h bar h by 2 pi, the Planck's constant, right? If I do that, what do I get?
less than E by
Right? So my processing speed, BPS, like number of bits by time, is this much. I have a computer with a mass m, and the entire mass is used to transmit information, bits. What is the maximum energy I can crank out of it? I have a computer or a device of mass m, so the maximum energy that I can crank out of it by special theory of relativity, mc square. So that means that's the maximum I can think of, right? Right? Any question? So right side is all physical constants, right? Speed of light and Planck's constant. Number of bits per unit time per mass, unit gram of mass. Nabendu, you're probably so this number if you just do, because C you know, C is what? 10 times 10 to the power 10 centimeter per second. H, Planck's constant of the order of 10 to the 27, depending on which unit you take. So C square will be 10 to the 20 order, 10 to the 27.
Minus 27. Plus 7.
So it was amazing how everyone actually came out with this, but in this early 70s it was actually proved to the only some assumptions that there is no loss of the information, maximum energy. Now think about this. So this is the thing, right? Now bring it back over here. I have a supercomputer. Mass is the same mass of Earth. Because I cannot build a supercomputer on Earth whose mass will be more than the mass of the Earth. Let's say the mass of the Earth, the whole Earth is actually a supercomputer. Take the mass of Earth. Assume that, right? Assume that it is counting bits since the origin of Earth. What is the age of Earth? What is the age of Earth? Whatever, 10 billion, whatever, 10 billion, 11 billion, whatever, right? So assume that you have a supercomputer whose mass is the mass of the Earth, is dissipating its complete energy mc square from the birth of Earth for 10, 14 billion, whatever. How many bits have you cranked so far? So that means if I put it over here, right? I mean, number of bits I could have cranked by that supercomputer for the age of the Earth. And if you do that, the number you will get is close to number of bits that you have cranked so far. Still that falls short of your 300 gate circuit. Forget about it. So see that. So these are called transcomputational problems. So you just see that your limits actually, but most often we are fine because we do very sophisticated heuristics, approximation. You reduce the time complexity from billions of years to whatever, and then you sacrifice a little bit of the quality. And I'm sure that some other talks will be delayed otherwise. But I can go on and on, but I can take some questions. You wanted to hear something? I'll actually make my slides available. You can read them if you have any questions and me know. Because I wanted to talk something else, but anything that you want to share, I'll be very happy. Is anybody sleeping?
Hello. Any questions from the audience? I wish you could have continued for some more, but we are pressed for time.
Yes, absolutely.
Question.
I do know that.
Thank you, sir, for such an engrossing talk.
Yes, build a supercomputer like this, yes.
So after that, what will happen to the Earth?
That's the thing, all energy will be exhausted, like mc square.
Who will be the user?
Yeah, that's true. Then you have to go to Mars, probably, or somewhere else.
None of that intelligence plan.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's going back to similar kind of thing that I gave a place to see that till that. Really.
So what I'm saying, the quantum computing is very interesting, but if you go to some of the early work, mostly coming from physicists and mathematicians, they did not think in terms of qubits, they did not think of the algorithms and all, but they were just saying, okay, what is it? But the Feynman had a very beautiful article. I think it came out in General Thermal Physics or somewhere, I remember, 82. So he talks about, but there are lots of losses, right? Even mc square, you have thermal noise, because the amount of heat that you generate, you have to dissipate the frequency of, because this is a frequency of computation, right? Because your circuit will burn out. It talks of quantum noise because there will be quantum entanglement in the physical point of view. So thermodynamics limit, quantum limit, then information theoretic limit also will come in the picture. So actually you crank much less, but this is the maximum that you can think of even. Even this is the speed which will be like this, and the total number of bits that you can crank by a giant supercomputer mass, same as the mass of Earth, cranking for billions of years, age of Earth. That's the maximum you can do. And the problems which exceed this number is called trans-computation problem. Like recognition by human eye. If you want to do exact deterministic algorithm, or not even very sophisticated circuits, even the very rudimentary circuits. Any other, with all that dignitary sitting? Anything else you want to share? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Now I'll request Dean sir to his